discuss some rap shit right now. Beginning hip hop, right? Breakbeat. Hey, let's go. Feel the beat. Make it move. All that shit, right? Okay, classic. So, hip hop starts off pretty much in this tip, right? Breakbeat culture, dancing, all that, cool shit, whatever, right? In the beginning, people weren't really rapping like that, right? I came a little bit later, right? Because again, you have to remember a lot of this stuff, again, hip hop is really about the beat. It's about the dancing, right? Having a good time. There were MCs, but the MCs were more saying like, little things, to make sure people got their car keys, their cars, whatever at the right time. But then of course it evolves and people start to actually rap, right? But again, rap, in my opinion, hip hop is not no spoken word. It didn't start off as spoken word. People went to the parties to dance and to hear dope beats, basically being kind of manipulated in a way that never existed prior. They were isolating the coolest parts of songs and dancing to that shit, hip hop, right? So rap starts off that way, whatever. Then obviously people start to rap, really put that pen down, the Melle Mels of the world, the Castors, all that. Cool. So you get rap that's kind of more about competition. My rhymes are better than you. Your rhymes are weak. Everything I say about myself is flat. That's hip hop. I mean, that's like the essence of an MC, okay? At its core. And that's cool. I mean, we like that about hip hop because life is competitive anyway. And you have to understand, for people coming out of the South Bronx, where they're in New York, a very competitive place where there's winners and losers every day. And life in general, it's a tough game. So the competitive aspect of it makes sense. We all struggle for something. We're all competing against others for something. And that's fine. I mean, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But the point is that that's hip hop at its core. That's emceeing at its core. It's that competition. Competition makes us better, right? Now, we're doing these songs, but then hip hop starts to shift a bit, okay? Now, what's interesting to me is we talk about the message, which I'm going to play right now. I can understand this change in the game because listen to how much slower it is in a little bit. It's slower, the beat's heavier, a little more like, whoa, where am I right now? Sort of fantasy-like almost, transports you to a different place. And I think this is where rap to me starts to become really powerful. And I can understand why people talk about the message as being that record that really shifted shit. Because you have Melle Mel rapping about real shit. Don't push me because I'm close to the edge, right? Like real life shit. So what's interesting to me about this record is obviously Melle Mel not wanting to do this because he felt that it would kill the vibe. I understand where he's coming from because again, certain things, when you're innovating, you don't always see what it is, right? So I do think it's fascinating that the song that Melle Mel is most known for is a song that he didn't even really want to do. But again, I understand it because if you're looking at hip hop as party music, competitive party music, why would you want to do a song about, the realities of street life in, New York City or wherever, right? On a slower beat. But it turns out that in fact, this was the hot shit. This is exactly what hip hop needed for it to not be a fad, but for it to progress into a real art form that says something, that expresses something deeper than just we out here partying, right? And again, the party element is always going to be there, and that party element is important. But it's nice when you can do more, right? When a genre has multiple angles and facets, that's when it really grows and starts to be fascinating, right? So anyways, I guess what I'm trying to say is that Melle Mel, funny enough in a way, and he's said about how rap fell off because rap started turning into some street shit. What I'm arguing is that Melle Mel himself, with this record, almost kicked that off. Even though I know exactly what Melle Mel means, and he didn't actually kick off the gangster shit. He wasn't about that life, and he's actually pretty much maintained that he wasn't never really trying to do that kind of music. But the point is that the message is a defining moment in rap in terms of going more of that reality rap, which is where the West Coast comes in, but I'm gonna get to that in a second. So, Melle Mel's doing this shit, the message, whatever, realistic shit. And even like what's interesting is around this time, or a little bit after, I remember seeing an interview with Houdini. I think they were on Soul Train when they were doing the Freaks Come Out at Night. They were even saying like, yo, we don't do that, trash can, baby in a trash can rap. Almost kind of like, we don't do that depressing, crybaby street shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're more on this tip, right? Have fun, take it back to, what hip hop is really about. You know what I mean? The party element, just, something else, right? So it's interesting that, again, but rap just kept going in that direction, in that reality rap direction. So you've got someone like, Run DMC, they start dressing like the street hustlers. They're trying to make it more real. The other thing I'm going to say real quick as a side note is that typically when a new genre or a new something comes out, like film, for example, and it's amazing. Technologically, things are, something new, some new expression has come through. Typically what tends to happen is that over time, it starts to get more and more naturalistic, meaning that, at first you look at, let's say, the earlier films without sound, and there are these like larger than life, portrayals, silent films, all that stuff. But then, of course, you get dialogue, and dialogue makes it more realistic because now people can speak, right? And then at first it's sort of like this heightened theater type of dialogue, but as time goes on, it starts to become more naturalistic, right? Marlon Brando, that people talk about a lot as being the greatest actor ever. The reason why people say this about Marlon Brando is that Marlon Brando brought naturalism, really, and that's my argument, into acting. He delivered lines in a way where it didn't feel like you were, in a way, he was the Rakim of, the rap game, of the film game, right? He started to deliver his vocals and his performances in a way that felt real, like actual real people, as opposed to film people, right? And obviously, he's the blueprint, and since then, Marlon Brando is the guy that people copy, right? And that's kind of, like I said with Rakim. Rakim kind of did it in a way where people started to become more naturalistic with their flow. It wasn't just a ha ha, that kind of, which is cool. It's aggressive. It's larger than life. But when you start to get it and make it more sort of, less of that, but you keep that vitality, but you make it more naturalistic, then you're doing some really amazing shit, right? So anyway, the point is that the groundwork for a lot of the rap turning street, quote unquote, in a more natural sense, was already being laid. You look at someone like I've talked about, Run DMC, dressing like the street hustlers. Rakim associating with guys out of Fort Greene, and now Rakim wasn't talking about drilling and none of that, like, crazy shit in his rhymes, but he was around some thorough people. He had that element, he had that raw Brooklyn, shout out to my man Gemini, but he had that energy where it's like, yo, like, I'm with some real dudes, we'll stomp you out if we have to, but we'd rather not, type of energy. So rap was already kind of going that direction. And then, of course, you've got NWA. Let's go, all right? Straight out of Compton. Yo, I always love how Ice Cube came on this, man. Crazy motherfucker named Ice Cube. That is hard. That is a hard way to start a record, man. Anyway, so the point is that West Coast, now their thing is, look, listen, we're going to do reality rap. We're going to put it on the fucking map. Reality rap really is street bullshit, really. But, rap was kind of moving in this direction in a way, or it could have been moving in this direction. And I think the West Coast supercharged it, right? LA specifically. So now you got to remember, Straight Outta Compton comes out. These guys go plat or almost plat with almost no airplay, which is pretty crazy when you think about it, especially back then. And obviously, the young white kids, the casuals, they're hearing about brothers shooting, this and that, and they're like, oh my god, this is the crazy shit, right? The suburbs, right? So they latch onto this shit. Now, I would argue this is where you've crossed the line, because you're literally rapping about, like, the reality is cool, but you're taking away that sort of MC aspect out the game. I mean, again, when NW and them were doing it, it wasn't completely gone, but you can really start to see how this is moving a lot away from actual MC competitive intellectual sort of like fly shit into, I'm really out here busting my gun, I'm really out here shooting people, I'm really out here doing this and that. And that's the primary appeal of your record. It starts around here, you know what I'm saying? And this is where rap starts to really devolve. And people can say again that, like, this is what really hip hop is at its core, but it's really not. I mean, hip hop really at its core is about that intellect, it's about that competitive, that flash shit. It's not really about the street element. You know what I'm saying? The street element was always around. It was around before hip hop anyway. People been doing, dumb shit, been robbing people, been stabbing people, been selling drugs, all that shit before hip hop. So the fact of the matter is that hip hop itself is something unique, because it's getting away from that. It's getting to an element where you guys go party and you have fun, competitive beats and high energy and stuff like that. That's hip hop, really. So what am I getting at here, right? Let me pause for a second. What I'm really getting at here is that the rhyme started to shift and the focus started to shift, like I was saying, into something more reality rap, more gangster. This is the problem with that, because like I said, it's taking away from what makes hip hop hip hop. Now, I would argue this is where the East Coast kind of comes back and almost saves this rap shit, right? Because this is what the East Coast starts to do. Shout out to my man, Method Man. You know I love this record. Humble and Juvenile on the cut. Love this joint. So this is what guys like Wu-Tang, Nas, Mobb Deep, and them start to do. They start to go real street with it, right? And I've talked to OGs about this, because again, it's not that people weren't street. I mean, you had Cool G Rap and stuff like that, forefather of street, Schoolie D. But it wasn't really a thing in the East Coast, at least from what I can see. But obviously, after NWA and them come out and start crushing buildings, then you start to see all like East Coast acts, for the most part, really start to go in that direction. Make it strong. This song at Norm. See, killing them softly with this song. Now, here's what I'm trying to get at here. What the East Coast started to do was this, like, because the West Coast was like, yo, listen, we really out here, we murking niggas, like, we really are out here doing drugs, reality shit, talking about our lives, right? Getting away from rap, in my honest opinion. But what East Coast artists start to do is say, okay, you know what? Because, to be fair, they're probably looking at people in the West selling all these records, and they're going, yeah, man, we do that shit too. Like, what the fuck? Like, y'all thought we weren't out here doing our thing, like, getting involved in street shit. So what cats in the East Coast, to me, started to do was they started to include that gangster shit and mix it with old MCing, right? So, perfect example of this is, for example, like, I'm killing you with my rhymes, with my songs, right? So there was that duality to it. Your mind, my mind spray, your nine spray, my mind spray, right? So like they were mixing that, like, yo, we'll murder you on wax and in the streets if it comes to that shit, right? Which is dope. I mean, and I can understand obviously how that would make somebody, especially a young listener, go like, holy shit, this is the craziest art form I've ever heard, because you're listening to real poets, guys who really know how to rap, who are making some incredible music, but at the same time, you can buy into the story, the narrative of them really busting their gun. And again, this is the whole thing. Like, there's always going to be an audience that is infatuated with the non-rap elements of hip-hop. The street shit. I mean, obviously, we've seen, like, in the grand scheme of things, in fact, I would argue maybe half, if not more than half, are infatuated with that element, which is why hip-hop continues to be street in that regard. It continues to talk about, yo, I was in the hood, I was in the trap, I was doing this and that. Because that shit is powerful. I mean, it's fascinating to watch someone live their life dangerously and you observe it. It's like a video game, right? Even though it's not the wisest approach. But the point is that that's essentially what I think is like where the East Coast really came in, the new East Coast. And again, it's part of that naturalizing thing where it's like, okay, well, as we get more and more realistic about what rap is supposed to express, that means we're going to show more about the drug game, what it does to you, all that kind of shit, blah, blah, blah. Now, I do think that, again, then the South came about and went kind of back to that, yo, it's not about rhyme skills. We don't care about rhyme skills. We just gonna make songs. We really out here busting our gun. But in fact, we're gonna make it like kind of simpler, like something that's like more easily digestible, but also still gives you that reality that you want, that quote unquote gang shit, right? So what's my point overall here? Well, I think that hip hop at its core, obviously, if you listen to it and start to digest it on a deeper level and really feel it, obviously it's something that came from New York. I think New York in general has made the best hip hop out of everybody, but they invented the shit, so it's kind of like, you know, goes without saying. And again, it's not to say that other coasts haven't done some great shit musically. They absolutely have. I mean, there are things that the West Coast have brought to the game. There's things that the South brought to the game, obviously. But what I am trying to say is that this obsession with realism and living out your rhymes and all that kind of shit, this stuff has actually made rap whack. And this is where rap started to really fall off. And it was a gradual process, you know what I'm saying? And again, Melle Mel is on record. He was saying that Big to him was whack. And I understand that because he's looking at it going like, Biggie's rapping about, you know, criminal shit. And in Melle Mel's day, Melle Mel couldn't do that shit. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, he's basically saying like, look, listen, y'all giving Biggie credit for rapping about criminal shit because he's giving you that reality rap fantasy that you want. And you're boosting him to GOAT levels because of that shit. But A, that's not really hip hop. And number two, like in the days when it was really real, we couldn't do that shit. And he's right. I mean, from what I've read and, you know, seen docs and all that stuff back then when it was like real killers and real hustlers and all that shit for real, like they weren't letting you just like get on the mic and talk about, yo, I do this and this and that. Like, nah. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, again, and also the precedent wasn't there for that kind of shit anyway. You know, now that precedent has been set. You know what I'm saying? So it is what it is. But as long as rap continues to go down the documentary, again, we talk about, you know, that reality rap thing, the aha video that Juvenile came with, documentary. Again, it's that attempt at reestablishing the reality of what's going on, right, in the hoods of Black America. As long as rap continues to be infatuated with that kind of shit, the music is just going to get worse and worse, to be honest with you. What rap needs to do is it does need to kind of come back to the competitive aspect of just like the fun and the sort of mental joust, right? Because that's kind of what we liked about rap to begin with, I would argue, or what makes rap really cool. Like when you look at the Nas's, even the Hoves of the world, yes, they're rhyming about street shit, but they're also spitting about stuff that's just basic rap competition of like why I'm flyer than you, why, you know what I'm saying, I have that competitive edge. And rap needs to get to that. It needs to come back to that. You know what I'm saying? And you can mix in some street shit if you so choose, but really, again, at its core, hip hop is more fun when there's like that competitive, intellectual, less sort of infatuation with a person's narrative, if that makes sense, you know, especially a criminal narrative. I hope that all makes sense. You know what I mean? Let me know in the comment section what you think about, you know, the South and the West Coast kind of watering down this rap shit. You let me know. Peace.